If you've followed my work and my career, you'll likely know I'm a big fan of the narrative storytelling approach to esports because it helps casual fans connect with the competitive aspects. They don't have to be experts and super insightful themselves. They don't get lost in what happens in Dota where everything's super nerding out. You've got to know the minute details of patches and comps, etc. It uses archetypes, familiar techniques of storytelling to set up who the stars are, what roles people play, how their career's gone, how they're going to match up with this other team that they're playing. So you think of some of the classic ones. Jankos was the king of the first blood, right? Perks is the most clutch, like Game 5 is where he always wins. Bjergsen carries, even if TSM's bad, and if they're good, he's the best player. But one thing you must never do, and one thing I never do myself within that narrative structure, I never fake the funk. The narrative cannot be fabricated or exaggerated. Now, others may disagree with me on this. Maybe they think it's just an entertainment show. It's just a bit of fun, or it's just to get views and to provoke discussion. I'm not about that. In my opinion, when you're doing analytical work and putting things down, marking them in history as this was the best player, this is the guy who did these things, that isn't a place for artistic license. This isn't the movie version of it where you rewrite it to be even cooler and actually he didn't have a girlfriend, but suddenly he's got a wife, like she's like in hospital and that's why he has to win to do it for her. Like that's what you do in a movie. In real life, like real life's real life. You've got to work with what's there. You can't just create something out of whole cloth, in my opinion. I think that's fucked up. So one of the reasons why is this is real life. This is not a movie. You can go and you can do your fucking little fan fiction if you want. Don't make it part of like who wins an award, who's marked down as who is the best, who you're going to tell people who is the best, as opposed to using your analytical mind, because these are pro players' careers, so credit where credit is due. Even if someone's been memed on, he has the worst narrative ever, if he carries the series in the final, give him the final player of the series or whatever. It doesn't matter that it's not a sexy storyline. I mean, you should never, in my opinion, make it that what happened in the game is subservient to the narrative. It's the other way around. The narrative's subservient to what happened in the game. So listen, we'd all like it to be that Bjergsen carried every series and that the real reason TSM made it through is just Bjergsen. Yeah, that would be pretty cool. That would be pretty epic. That'd be great for a movie. But that wasn't really the case. So that it becomes kind of bullshit because then someone's going to say Bjergsen every single set. Was he that's like the only player that's got what? No one else was ever the best player of a set. That's the problem. So you know what? If you ever, this happens in the past, if someone's like a great player, rising talent, a champion, and you hail them as like, that's all the things they are, they reach a big series, and you know what? Their team wins, but they're not the best, or they're just all right, or they even have a bad series. That's happened in the past. Don't then take a player who underperformed, or wasn't what you said he was, and go, but he did win, so I could just... if I mess with them, then I ignore that, and then I say anything. And then just make a reason as to why your narrative maintains. Your narrative now has to change because that's not what happened. Now, that's not the end of the world. They didn't carry one series. In fact, I'd say it's pretty immature and childish that you have to believe that they did to stick with your sort of narcissistic desire that your narrative's the case. That's kind of fucked up. That would be like if I just ignored that Froggen had probably his worst year of his entire career. I'd say even worse than the Elements one, even though I thought that was pretty terrible. And I just said, you know what, actually, I'm just going to spin it that all his teammates are bad and coaching staff doesn't get him and they fucked with the lineup in the office. No, doesn't matter. That might be a more pleasing narrative to me. It ain't what happened. So I just give it up. Yeah, it was bad. He was even bad on majors. He was totally ineffective. He misplayed, looked selfish at times. That's because I'm trying to actually tell an accurate historical record. Yes, it's going to be biased to me and my way of modelling the game and my thoughts, but I'm certainly not making those go over what I see and what ultimately in my heart I know is, listen, true is kind of ridiculous. I mean, we're talking about like trying to make a judgment here, but the judgment that I actually come to in my head doesn't get to be overruled by what I wish was true in my heart. So look at who performed on the team and then build a narrative around that. By the way, you're just bad at narratives as well if you have to crowbar them from the past and ones that don't work anymore. Like, use the narrative now. The game always tells you who's going on. In fact, the fact that a guy who did terrible the whole split but then comes together, that's a pretty cool narrative in itself if you have some skills. If not, get the fuck off the mic. I'll take a turn. So this is not WWE. It's not solely about entertainment. There's also, as I've alluded to, the historical record to consider. Someone going back and watching that VOD again. Someone looking on Gamepedia and going, this was the player of the game. These things matter. So listen, we know that who the best team was in a series. Most likely it was the team that won the match, right? It's rare that that's not the case. But imagine a kid in the future. He only starts watching LEC or LCS like 3 years from now. So he looks up results and he's going to see things that partially are true. There's a grain of truth. Some of it's true. It's 2/3 true. But then he doesn't know you just mixed in a bit of bullshit just to make the narrative stronger. You didn't want to weaken it or have to restart or actually do some fucking work and figure out how to formulate the narrative as to how it then went from beyond that point. Like, listen, I'm a huge fan in NFL history of Peyton Manning as a quarterback. But you know what? The one Super Bowl he won when he really was like one of the best players in the whole league, actually in the Super Bowl itself, probably shouldn't have got MVP. Probably should have gone to one of the defensive players. Like, there was a bunch of factors that some of those guys did. He was just good. Like, in the context that he was a rain-out game, yeah, he did, but he wasn't the best player. Nah. But because everyone wanted to crown him, he'd finally won a Super Bowl, they were all waiting for him to become the greatest ever. People just forced it through anyway. People said, fuck it, just give it to him anyway. That's whack to me. That means that player who should have got it just doesn't get the credit, just doesn't get to be allowed to win because he's not Peyton Manning. You haven't built a story for him. Again, is this sports or is this a fucking TV show? I'm watching a soap opera right now. What is this? Or is this WWE where some guy who's not even good at wrestling in real life, obviously not in the applicable to this case, gets to be the champion because he's just more popular? That doesn't work for me. That's fucking whack. Always will be. So when you're talking about these things, MVP of the split, player of the game, all pro of the split, these things matter. These are things for the historical record. These are things that people can look back in the future. These are things people put on their actual resumes. I was a 3-time All-Pro, I was a 3-time All-NBA, whatever it might be. Like, those are the things people are going to use to argue how great those players are. So when they're off, or they're just pushed by a narrative, people aren't going to remember that was the narrative 5 years later. You've just ruined history effectively. And all, so in the moment you could feel better and not have to do your fucking job. So this is just crazy for me. LCS and LEC for me sort of went to the dark side over these last few weeks in that regard, with the narrative storytelling overtaking what was happening in the game. Because they had two very real and very exciting storylines. So in LEC, you had Gilius fueling Schalke's miracle run, where they're beating the best teams, they're making the playoffs. It was a guy who was never supposed to even be in position to do something like that. He wasn't even in LEC for the most of the split. Not most of the start of the split. Then in LCS, you had Bjergsen drags TSM to the playoffs. Then through the lower bracket, he's carrying them until finally they come alive. And then, wow, a team that almost certainly were not going to be champions. I mean, you could literally have listed 2 or 3 teams before them. Suddenly wins the LCS. The trouble is, they took those storylines I just gave you and they just pushed them to the point of parody and spoiled the analytical and historical record of some of those matches. Like, let's think first of all about the LEC example. So let's just go ahead and say it. Like, what was Gilius just the reason why everything happened? No, he was one of the main reasons. I'd let you say he's the main reason. Yeah, I don't think that's unreasonable. But you know what? Schalke wasn't just Gilius. Like, Otto was like a sleeper carry. He was doing his thing. He's been doing his thing all fucking year. Dreams had some games where he legit smurfed, like found spots in the game. You're like, fucking hell, this guy's got a great eye actually for sometimes when to roam and do a play. Abadage obviously started actually smurfing at the end of the split. Had some really nice plays. Dylan Falco, the coach, looked like he did a really good job coaching the team on the fundamentals. One of the things about how they won is they didn't just win off pop-offs. Like, they had pop-off from Gilius sometimes on the right champs, but actually the team played pretty clean. Like, they played impressively, like they knew what they were doing. So when it comes to the player of the game, like, yeah, I would say, yeah, I'm with you. Gilius is the player of the game for most of them. He was super sick, especially compared to his expectations and his rep. No one thought he was someone who could go head-to-head with, like, Selfmade, Yankos, Shadow. No, that was never supposed to happen. EU junglers are no joke, homie, and Gilius has been around for years and years. So he won the player of the game 5 times in the split, right? He won it in week 4 against Fnatic before the Miracle Run. He won it in week 6, Misfits. He won it week 7, Excel, week 7, OG, week 8, Fnatic. Now, I will just point out, of those teams, 3 of them, Misfits, Excel and OG, 3 of the 5, basically the other 2 were Fnatic, didn't make the playoffs. And Fnatic only made the playoffs because Schalke and I think it was G2, made the playoffs. And then Fnatic won like the 3rd set of tiebreaker conditions against Excel. So none of these, by the way, are player of the game against like elite teams, like G2, fucking, Rogue, Mad Lions, the teams that for most of the split were the best. So actually, these are against some of the teams that ended up bottom. Listen, I know some of them are very good players. It was a very competitive split. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But the point is, this isn't like, wow, took over the whole league. So 5 times he was considered player of the game collectively. Now look what that got him. That got him, first of all, he was the 3rd team All-Pro jungler. Now, listen, that doesn't initially sound terrible. At least they didn't put him 1st or 2nd. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, he was very good over, like, some of those, like, at least 5 of those 8 games, maybe 6. Maybe he had another one that you could throw in there that he didn't get it from. Yeah, wait a minute, he was better than Selfmade for the whole split. By the way, let's just consider some factors. Not ones I always pick when we're using these factors, but other ones that everyone else uses, it seems. Selfmade's team finished above Gilius's at the end of the split. Selfmade was a strong individual player. I would argue the best player of Fnatic over the split, but I certainly don't mind if people say Reckless as well. I think Reckless was pretty good. Those are the only 2 players who didn't really break down for me over the split. The others had some really bad times. But you know what? The problem is, Selfmade didn't have a WWE storyline, did he? So by the logic of the LEC voters, it's better to lose tons of games and be shit and then win a bunch and end the split strong and look really good, rather than win a bunch, more games, and then lose less games than fewer games than the guy I just referred to before. And that makes you worse. You're a worse player for doing that. Because guess what? It ain't a sexy storyline that you were winning in the beginning weeks and now at the end you just hobbled into the playoffs. That's just not a cool storyline. I mean, the reality of what happened in the game and over the 18-game split is very different from that, but you've made that subservient to the storyline you want to be true. So let's consider this. Get rid of the first round robin of an LEC split if we're going to do this. If we're going to not vote responsibly and consider the whole split, if we're only going to look at the last 9 games. Get rid of the voters if they can't vote with their heads instead of their hearts and what they want to be the case. Consider this for a second. This guy was 3rd team All-Pro. Remember, every other time in history, you've got to be like top 3 teams to get on those. It's very rare you can get on if you're not. 5 teams, 5 finished above Gilius's Schalke. But we're supposed to believe, let's just put this out as a premise and think about it as food for thought. Either, you'll find out in a second, 0, 1, or only 2 of those 5 junglers were better than Gilius over the whole split. But there's going to be a detail I'm going to tell you in a minute about Gilius that's going to make that even more outrageous. Let's go to the MVP voting. You're probably already thinking, if you didn't look into this, what would be the relevance? Oh no. In the MVP voting, where you vote for your top 3 players and it works on points where they aggregate it, Gilius not only got votes, I don't mind if one person went crazy. What's ridiculous is, you can only vote for 3 people as your MVP of the whole split, and of 48 voters, when I counted it, 32 of them picked him in the top 3. 32. So only 16 thought, well, no, there's 3 better players than him over the entire split. So in terms of number 1 votes, oh yeah, by the way, he got number 1 votes. 8 people voted Gilius the MVP of the entire split. Medic, Ender, Shocks, Bully, which is Law, Taco Stop, whoever the fuck that is, Mithy, Duke, Kevin Bell, again, who the fuck is Kevin Bell, some guy from Riot Games. So a bunch of coaches, some casters, some talent. Then, number 2 votes. Oh, you had a bunch of those. You had 6 number 2 votes. Number 3, you had 18 votes. So add them all up. There you go. There's your 32 votes. Now just consider for a second. Top 3 in votes. Some people voting your MVP of the whole split. 1st place. Schalke finished 6th. Not even tied for 6th, just outright 6th, the worst placed team of the 6 playoff teams. Gilius didn't play the whole split. It was Lurux being sick that got him in, which started the sexy storyline from what I remember. He played 12 out of the 18 games. He lost 4 of those before they won like the 8 in a row, whatever the fuck it was, to get to the playoffs. So he only played 2/3 of the split. And for some people, playing only 2/3 of the split, he was a more worthy MVP than Cap, Slath and Shadow. Now, by the way, just in case I have to rephrase that, in case you're not getting the point here, that means the 6 games he didn't play, he has a 0 performance, and those games cannot be counted towards his success as an MVP, but they must be counted as part of his overall performance. So for those games, he did not exist in those games, he did not play them. So that means people like Cap, Slash and Shadow, they're allowed 6 games freebies there. They're allowed 6 games where they're just a bad player, but they're fucking in the game. This is outrageous. Even if you're going to use the logic, which a lot of people do, I notice, in League of Legends, where most valuable, instead of most valuable, like in my opinion, being the best player makes you the most valuable, but they'll say most valuable is like relative to your team and then what you brought and then what you did. So what normally people are using there, they're very poor at articulating because they don't tend to follow sports, is it's a theory called like wins above replacement. Like if you took a replacement level player, like an average level player, and just put him in that person's spot, like how many more wins would you get with Gilius there than just the average guy there? But the problem with that logic, right, it's not terrible if you want to argue it for Gilius, I'd still say Cap's probably won on that regard alone, is if you were going to do that, how can you only do that this split and not every other split in history? You've just fucked the historical record again. You've been irresponsible with your voting. Because if we're going to do that, then we go back to see the spring season 4, where Western Wolves barely made the playoffs and they had Forgiven, and he was a fucking monster. He was the best ADC in the whole league. He should have had the MVP over Reckless in that case, but no, because Reckless's team finished number 1 in the split. So Reckless got the MVP. Perks should have been the MVP over Caps in Season 8, particularly in Season 8 Summer, because he was clearly the second best mid laner. They had to play those fucking insane funnel comps around him just to get wins. The team was having real troubles, didn't even do well in the playoffs. Like, actually, they had some real issues. But yeah, Caps was an absolute monster, best player for my money. But if you want to say wins above replacement, and then Perks wins that one, because Caps also had some very good players in his team. In fact, when he left his team, they continued to finish second, third at Exaggeration and LCS the year after that without him, with a fucking rookie in his place. So there's another one. How about this split? By that logic, I tell you a player right now who deserves it more than Gilius. It's Alfari. What the fuck would OG finish last anyway? They'd have won like no games, 1 game, 2 games without Alfari. Alfari was the best top laner. I don't give a fuck that his team finished last at the end. Even then, remember, it's not a last week go 0-18, is it? So I also, by the way, I'm just going to throw this out there. Like I said, I alluded to before, this is also a bullshit metric when the usual lazy logic that everyone applies, media and analysis team alike, goes, you have to be in a top 2 team to be the MVP, which usually just means you have to be in G2 and Fnatic, or rather you can't not be in G2 and Fnatic. That's just the way it's going to go, right? So what I hate about this is the exaggeration. Listen, there's a very great storyline in there about Gilius. He was one of the best junglers over the last 8 games. Shouldn't even have been in the game. Has a rep where he talks big, but then never delivers really. He's just a decent jungler. It's very obvious how he plays. He was doing great. It's a big accomplishment already to be one of the best junglers over the last 8 games of a very competitive split. He made the playoffs. That's an accomplishment. He won a series in the playoffs. That's an accomplishment. He's cemented that he has a career in LEC again. This is all great shit. It's a great storyline. Why'd you have to exaggerate it? Why'd you have to make it a fucking fairy story? Why does it have to be some Christmas magic? Similarly, don't make it sound like he was 1v9. That's so disrespectful to his fucking team. Every player of SO4, every player of Schalke by the end, and their coaching staff, I think got their shit together by the end of this. He might have carried him the first few games. Odo was still very good. But everyone had their games. Even Neon had that Senna game where he was going ham. Like, everyone had their moments. Yes, he might have had the most, but don't make it seem like he had them all. Then let's go to LCS. So, again, a great storyline because TSM makes the playoffs. And even though over the split, I think Jensen was better than Bjergsen, Jensen's team was also better and his teammates were performing better. So, you know what? Bjergsen, yeah, was very strong. Then, TSM loses to Golden Guardians. Everyone but Bjergsen looks bad. Like, I even told Demonte to his face on the crackdown, listen, homie, you won that series, but like, you weren't better than Bjergsen. Like, let's not fuck around here. Credit where credit's due, always. Then TSM beats Tanglis. I shouldn't even have been in the playoffs. It's pathetic that that was even allowed. Then they play GGS again. It's a full 5-game series. You know what? I give you that one as well. I think he was carrying in that series. I think everyone else had their issues. And there was times where GGS actually kind of threw it. And I don't think some of the TSM players look good. But you know what? The problem is the narrative then took hold in people's minds and it never stopped. And people built it into this narrative that because in those series he was 1v9, that he was 1v9 the whole time and won the split. That is so disrespectful. No player in the history of LCS has ever 1v9'd and won the split. You can laugh all you want about NA. Nobody's ever done it. Not even Bjergsen in past teams. There was always people as good or playing well on his teams that helped him also win. Even if he was the best player or the best player in the league. So then he won the player of the split for every TSM win. So we've already talked about 2 of them. Maybe there was, let me think actually. Logically, there must have been 5. 5 for 5 of them. GGS, I'm with you. I just said, you know what? Fuck it. Cloud9, we can do that. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Though I'll say on that one, he was far from 1v9. But okay, player of the series. Yeah, why not? I think he was the better player in that one. I think he was the main focal point. It was the main reason they just couldn't handle him. Team Liquid, no fucking way. First of all, over the first 3, I'd argue maybe even 4 games, Jensen was outperforming Bjergsen. He was the better mid lane. He was the better person with the name fucking Sin. He was the best Danish player in the server. Like, that's not even something controversial. Like, I could argue my case in many different regards there. My biggest problem isn't the whole Bjergsen-Jensen thing. It's that Doublelift was the player of the series. He adapted his champion pool. Senna and Ashe suddenly are good champions for him. Like, Senna especially. He's completely turned his game around from the spring split and even the rest of the regular split. He was carrying versus his replacement in Team. Like, what a fucking great storyline. Overlooked because everyone wanted to force that Bjergsen's 1v9 as a bullshit meme, but treat it like it's reality. Doublelift averaged something like 6 kills a game in this series. At least 2 games, he just fucking like full on carried. He was the main guy, but no. We have to treat it that if Bjergsen ever locks in TF and Zilean and they win, it must be Bjergsen who 1v9 the game. It's just disrespectful as fuck. I'd even say the FlyQuest series in the final, I think, was debatable. I wouldn't hate it if someone went to Bjergsen for that one. Like, I think it's debatable, like I say. Personally, I think I would have picked Broken Blade, because not only did he have a bunch of pop-off games, but the meta of what he was picking and how he attacked and put pressure on solo cracked Fly's entire style. Other than that, they would have been fine. I think they actually would have... I mean, obviously they could have won. I think some of the games they won before the game fight were kind of bullshit, but they potentially could have won this series. We'll never know with the whole Wild Turtle scenario, but put that out of your mind for now. There's no point debating that at this point. Why does it have to be that he was for every single one? Especially, by the way, don't then take that and then run go out. Since he was a player of all 5 series, he just 1v9'd. That's so disrespectful to history and his teammates. Doublelift's evolution as a player should have been lauded. Remember, this is the guy with the most championships, still more than Bjergsen. Him playing the way he did, where he was basically a fucking weak-side AD carry a bunch of the time, allowed Broken Blade to play carries top again, which took away a weakness, Broken Blade on tanks, and suddenly, now Broken Blade's carrying when he's got the focus, when he's the strong side. Spicker went from a meme at the beginning of the playoffs, because there were so many matches, to a legit good jungler, competitor for one of the best in NA, I don't think the best personally, counting the whole split, with like unique champion pool, was clutch in some of the game 5s, pulling out shit like Shen. Biofrost had those clutch game 5s on Rakan. Listen, it's not a pick that made sense in some of the fucking comps, but it didn't matter. He pulled it out. He had some clutch shit, same way Bjergsen did with his Zilean. Bjergsen, here's another stat for you. So remember, they played something like 14 games. Was it 14? Let me think. This is over the series I'm talking about, where he got the player of the game. Over those 14 games, at TSM won 9 of them, and all 9 wins came on these 3 champions. TF, Zilean, Syndra, right? Syndra's a good champion and Bjergsen's signature. TF and Zilean were all about the other teams didn't know how to play against them. The globals, the map pressure ended up being a massive factor. Teams just couldn't do anything against him. So basically, 3 main it's not like he was smurfing, like, oh, he played 6, 7, 8 different champions, like every single matchup, he's winning both sides of it. No, it wasn't like that. That wasn't the case at all. Like, that's actually unreasonable because it doesn't also point out that the coaching staff figured out the meta, figured out what to do with Doublelift, what to do with Biofrost coming back in the lineup, by the way. It wasn't even the player up until like that last, was it the last GGS series or was it? Yeah, I think so. Obviously, you had to get Spicker online. He would have been a complete liability otherwise. You had the scenario where Broken Blade had to be able to carry, so we had to shift the game to make. He wasn't a liability. If it was 1v9, they don't beat any of those teams, minus maybe GGS and C9. C9 was debatable, but I'd say, yeah, they probably still beat C9. They're not beating TL and FlyQuest if he's just 1v9. Never let what you want to have happened overrule what actually happened. Opinions can differ, don't get me wrong. Some of these ones, you can say I'm nitpicking and you don't agree with that one small opinion. But I don't buy all of these, the way this is just being whitewashed to be a fucking story out of a movie. I also, by the way, will just say, when you look into who voted for some of these things, this is why I don't want media voting for things. Because media in the modern day is corrupt. They just care about the clicks and the storyline. That's fucking whack. So don't make it in a WWE. It's the LCS and LEC. It's not WWE. Otherwise, if we're going to make it WWE, it's just about the storyline being the king above everything and just about views and getting fans excited. Well, then fuck it. Get rid of all competitive integrity. Let's just seed the playoffs so it's the most exciting matchups and the best bracket draws. Let's handicap the boring teams and players so they don't have a very good chance of making it. Let's have a fan vote to send the last team to Worlds, no matter whether they got knocked out in the first round or in the fucking split itself. Yeah, in that scenario, go crazy, right? Why do halfway compromises on your integrity? Just go all fucking out. Or have some fucking integrity to go along with your character and actually stick to it and tell us what really happened so that history, which matters, can actually tell an accurate story. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Spencer Green, Whattathings, Pranogo, Matt Shakowski, Tobias Bernasconi, JDubs, Alexander Rao, Xinged, the Puyallup Tribe, Jensen Goh, Hades, Andreas Kroknes, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my boy Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you want to ask me a question in one of those video AMAs I do. Do you want teasers? Do you want to see who the next guests are on my shows? Do you want to take part in an in-depth esports discussion with moi? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the Patreon link in the description box below.